Hello, happy Friday. Just trying to get this slideshow on the road. I hope you all have had a wonderful week so far. It's been a great week for me. I was and am very, very excited that my course or our 12-week course has kicked off, Level Up. Everybody who signed up, we have a beautiful group together and I'm just excited for them to learn essentially. But anyway, I do hope you had a lovely week also. I hope that you have started into September on a good note. It's still beautiful over here in Germany at the moment, but it's definitely getting colder. This morning we had like 50 degrees Fahrenheit, so 10 degrees Celsius, which is, you know, pretty chilly when you're working out outside, but it was still a good workout and still nice and sunny. So anyway, let's get into today's topic, which is losing the last 5 pounds. Actually, I should have probably named that the last 5 to 10 pounds because the last 10 pounds can be pretty stubborn at times. Sometimes your journey is pretty, well, I don't want to say linear, but successful for the most part, especially early on, and then you get to your last 5 to 10 pounds, and it just feels stubborn, or it feels like it's a lot harder than what it should be. So anyway, today I want to give you some pointers how you can get past that, or basically make sure you are actually achieving your goal and not giving up just before the finish line. So I'm going to dive right into it. What is the first thing we should be looking at when we want to lose the last 5 pounds? We want to have food quality as high as possible. So in order, those last 5 pounds, they are usually more distributed around your lower belly fat. For some people, it might be in the thighs, but most people hold on to the lower belly fat up until the very end. The reason for that is that it's kind of your body's insurance policy for survival. So it thinks, when we're dieting, essentially we are, well, not starving our body, that sounds too drastic, but we are putting our body through some stress, and it's probably a little bit afraid that you are not going to make it. So therefore it keeps a little bit of a safety cushion around the lower belly. And in order to get rid of that, we do need to do a lot of, or sometimes we need to employ some strategies that are outside of the simple calorie deficit rule. But nonetheless, we always should ensure that food quality is high. I mean, generally speaking, as most of you know, we are advocating for a flexible dieting approach with 80 to 90% of whole foods. But when it comes to the last 5 to 10 pounds, bumping that up to 90 to 100% whole foods is one of the most beneficial things, because there is less room for error. So food manufacturers are allowed to have a discrepancy between what it says on the packaging or what your food scans as when you put it through or into MyFitnessPal, and what it really is of about I think they narrowed the margin to like 27% or whatever, which is a lot if you think about it. And of course, who's going to bank on that? People who produce healthy, quote unquote, healthy food as well, because of course it sells better if something says it's 100 calories, even though it's actually 120, right? So the more whole foods, the less room for error, the more you're also going to feel more satiated in your gut, and you're going to have more micronutrients, more fiber, and all of that. So really bumping up your food quality to 90 or 100% of whole foods should always be the first step when it comes to getting rid of the stubborn last 5 pounds. Then, of course, with that sort of hand in hand, also not a surprising one, bumping up your accuracy. So if generally speaking, you allow yourself to eyeball things maybe 3-4 times a week because you're eating out or someone else cooks for you. See that you can weigh out as much as possible. And also double checking things from packages, because sometimes it says it's like, 2 servings and it weighs 16 ounces or so, and then you weigh it out and it's like actually more than that. It does happen, really. And do make sure you're accounting for all these extra little licks and bites and so on. Sometimes you have your kids running around and then they give you something, or you're like tasting while you're cooking. So really being mindful of all of these things, and that's probably not coming as a surprise to you. Get moving. Yeah, of course, we want to make sure we're keeping our NEAT the same or high in a dieting phase anyway, or potentially even increasing our energy expenditure, as most of you know. But this pertains more to like the distribution of movement. So if we, quote unquote, just go for our 1 walk a day and 1 workout a day, that is awesome already. But if you're looking to how can I optimize things even more, would potentially be splitting that same amount of steps into more frequent movements throughout the day. This simply helps with digestion, but it also helps with your body not being so inclined to store the food that you're consuming away from those movement phases as food storage, and rather to utilize it more. So instead of doing 1 30-minute walk, maybe doing 10-minute walks, 3 10-minute walks after all of your meals. That would be a small way to help, quote unquote, boost that digestion. Hydrating more, simply, well, is going to help you stay satiated more, but it also helps flush things out. We don't want to overhydrate while we're eating. That simply interferes with nutrient absorption, so that's not what I'm talking about. But generally speaking, you do want to be on the higher end of your water target, especially hydrating before meals. So before meals, there's no harm in drinking, 2 glasses of water or so, or around your training as well, but you don't want to be drinking a ton with your meal or after your meal, and that's not so beneficial. And when it comes to hydration, we can also use some things that are more anecdotally helping with weight loss, rather than really being backed up with a ton of scientific data. But something like consuming apple cider vinegar before your meals, or at least once a day, like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water, warm water preferably, because that's helping with digestion further, or lemon water in the morning, or just more water in your greens drink, and so on. But the apple cider vinegar in particular, a tablespoon in 1 glass of water, warm water, tastes gross. Not denying that. But you can also get capsules of apple cider vinegar if you prefer that. In any case, it might help. We want to make sure that our digestion remains regular. That is also important, not just because it makes you feel uncomfortable, but also because it messes with the scale if we have too many things backed up. So really look at your fiber, and actually on this side, because chances are your calories are reasonably low when you're down to the last 5 pounds or so. Some people, or a lot of people, actually say that see that they consume too much fiber, and when we not too much fiber overall, but too much fiber in relation to the calories that they're consuming, because of course it helps with satiation. So many of us are like, oh, okay, let's just eat all the vegetables because it's going to help me feel fuller. However, if you don't have enough material to push that undigestible thing out, then it's going to be stuck in there and you're going to get constipated. So just make sure that you're sort of like, if you're constipated, that you're more or less within those 10 to 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed. So adjust that depending on how low your calories are in your cut. You might want to think about adding in digestive enzymes if digestion really is something that you're struggling with. You might want to think about adding in probiotics, or if you're not consuming them through whole foods on a daily basis really, and also be really mindful of not over consuming sweeteners, because again, we might be thinking, okay, I don't have that many calories, so I'm going to drink all the diet soda, it makes me feel fuller. I'm going to chew gum all the time, it makes me feel fuller. I'm going to only eat yogurt with sweeteners because I don't want to waste it on carbs or so. So just be really mindful of that, and because they tend to add to bloating, and B, it just in general can really mess up your digestion if you consume too many of the wrong sweeteners. Not everybody tolerates all sweeteners. So for instance, for me, sucralose is a little bit of a trigger. Almost all the others I'm fine with in moderation, but it's just, like, look at your digestion and don't just say like, okay, I feel uncomfortable, that's what it is. See how you can optimize it. Of course, optimizing stress management, I did have to put that in there, even though it might seem like, oh yes, okay, I know I should be doing better. But when it comes to that lower belly fat, once again, like, dieting in and of itself is a stressor to your body. Training hard in and of itself is a stressor to your body. And so if you have a lot of other stressors on top of that, such as emotional stressors or work stress and everything else, it's just going to add up, and your body is going to feel more unsafe, holding on to that lower belly fat in particular even harder, because it's recognizing, hey, right now is not the time to be losing any more of that fat. We're already in danger of not surviving. So think about how you can manage your life stress, but also think about your training stressors, and if you have added in cardio, for example, to increase that calorie deficit, just think about maybe it might be better to switch that short HIIT workout to a LISS workout, or just in general how you can optimize that straining stress, perhaps less compound movements at really heavy weight and more hypertrophy stuff in the higher rep range end. Optimizing sleep as best as possible, using your breath for optimizing stress. So even in the middle of your workday, trying to remind yourself of, is this really that big of a deal right now? Or just taking 2 minutes to center your breath and and bring your nervous system down. You can also utilize other stress management aids, such as adaptogens, for example, ashwagandha, and just thinking about how you can outsource other things that cause you stress during this particular time. I'm not saying always, but for example, utilizing meal prep services, paying someone to do your lawn instead of doing it yourself, asking your spouse for more help in the household, etc., etc. Again, we're only in this last little weight loss phase for a specific amount of time, so just really adjusting your life to that can be very helpful, and minimize that time even further rather than dragging it out because you think you got to do it all while losing the last 5 pounds. There are supplements that do help with not just losing the last 5 pounds, but overall weight loss. However, I really want to preface this that until you have the basics down with food quality, with your macros and calories and your accuracy, with your training, with your stress management, with your regular supplements, we shouldn't even be looking at that, because these ones here, they make the difference of like that 0.1% type of thing. Okay, maybe a tiny little bit more, but it depends on the person, right? When it comes to the supplements, I'm not a big fan of those that are labeled fat burners or anything like that. Just because they are usually a weird blend, which most of it is actually just caffeine or maybe green tea. So, in my opinion, that's why I mentioned caffeine consumption in there. In my opinion, you'd be better off just drinking your coffee. Coffee or caffeine does somewhat help with your metabolism because, well, it just increases our body temperature. We just always need to be mindful of it not interfering with our sleep. On the other hand, because then, insufficient sleep or bad quality sleep is going to outweigh that short little benefit from boosting your metabolism through caffeine. So just consider that. And that kind of runs into pre-workouts, because most pre-workouts do contain caffeine or guarana, which is actually even stronger than caffeine, and that's like the main component of most pre-workouts. So I would be cautious with that. However, if, because you are in such a deep and long calorie deficit, you are feeling more depleted in your workouts, you're feeling like you're not motivated, or you can't really put in the same amount of effort, you're struggling to even just maintain the weights that you used to use, then, especially if you're working out in the morning, a pre-workout could be helpful. The other ones, so here I would start with, well, obviously your omega-3 should already be in your regime, but you could bump that up even further, just because it is anti-inflammatory, therefore helping your body deal with any kind of stress that you are exposing it to, including the dieting stress. MCTs are, so that's kind of what is meant to be in coconut oil, or just more concentrated. They are, to an extent, meant to be anti-inflammatory too, so that could be another thing to add in there. If you say, okay, I can't eat as many vegetables as I want to in order to stay regular with my digestion, you could bump up the spirulina or greens powder to get even more micronutrients and help support your body that way, since your calorie consumption is so low, and therefore probably your micronutrient consumption lower than usual also. You might also not be eating a lot of red meat at the moment, just being mindful of the fact that red meat is slightly higher in fats and calories than things like chicken breast or white fish, and therefore it could be beneficial bumping up your vitamin B, particularly vitamin B12 intake. You can also look into supplements that might be beneficial when it comes to helping your blood sugar regulation, because that obviously is also linked to when your body wants to store fat and when your body wants to build muscle. So things that could be helpful when it comes to blood sugar regulation in the sense of supplements is inositol. Taking that is actually a B vitamin, I think via vitamin 6, but it's we're not calling it a vitamin anymore because it's not technically of the same structure or criteria. So anyway, inositol, NAC is another anti-inflammatory supplement also, kind of similar in its functions to omega-3. And then we also have L-carnitine. Sorry, I misspelled that here. Berberine is probably the most popular supplement, or most commonly known sort of weight loss supplement, aside from traditional fat burners. And there is actually a good amount of data to that it might help with blood sugar regulation and metabolism, again, just to a small extent, but nonetheless, it's likely to help a little bit, even if it is that 0.1%. So all of these are things to consider alongside with collagen, just in the sense of helping with mobilization in terms of tissue mobilization, so transferring fat cells from white fat cells into brown fat cells, and therefore those brown fat cells are more likely to be mobilized and oxidized for energy than white ones. So again, small data on all of these available. Another thing, aside from supplements or all the things that we have already spoken about, is you can in fact do more ab work. While we can't pinpoint where we lose fat from, by doing or including more ab or core work into your training program, you're just gonna increase the blood flow into that area, and therefore particularly or potentially also that lower belly fat, which tends to be the last 5 pounds or so. So you could either, do your compound lift and then do a set of ab work, so as supersets, or you might just say, hey, I'm gonna do 10 sit-ups before I jump into the shower in the morning. I'm going to do 10 sit-ups before I brush my teeth in the evening, or, maybe a little bit more, but just kind of increasing that blood flow into that area over the course of the day. Hot and cold exposure is I probably should have mentioned that before some of the other ones, such as the supplements or the ab work one, because there is so much more data on this coming out, and that it is so beneficial when it comes to that improved fat mobilization and oxidization. It also teaches your body to get better at dealing with stressors. So while I wouldn't necessarily start with a ton of cold exposure during the tail end of your weight loss phase, just because it is an extra stressor at first. If you're someone who is already doing cold plunges, you could increase that a little bit, or the frequency or the duration. But if you're just like now wanting to get started with something, I'd probably go for the sauna instead of the cold exposure at first, and then once you're out of the weight loss phase, start with the cold exposure then, in order to teach your body for future purposes to deal with the stress better. But yeah, sauna exposure, really great, or even infrared sauna, even though you don't sweat that much, there is still a lot of benefits when it comes to that. Any kind of sweating really, of course, obviously helps clear out our pores, but also just helps with, again, fat mobilization. So I'd probably make that one of my biggest points, aside from the accuracy one, and of course the food quality one also. And then lastly, as cheesy as it sounds, mindset and happiness, but sometimes we get to that tail end or the final stretch and we think, oh, I'm never gonna lose that. I've never been this lean. Is this really even possible for me? I've never, or like that negative self-talk type of thing, or you've literally never seen that number on the scale, and so you don't know if this is your body set point or whatever. So the more positive self-talk you can actually engage in, and the more you can focus on happiness overall in the course of your day, the less you're going to be thinking about food also, because sometimes when we get to that tail end of the dieting phase, food is like everything that consumes your mind, right? So the more you can distract yourself by other ways other than food, the easier it's going to feel. And yeah, get support from your friends, from other people that have achieved a really lean physique, and ask them for pointers as well, and just how they managed to get through that. I do want to say that these tips are not particular for like weight cuts, so these pointers are not necessarily for someone who needs to make weight for a dieting show or for a specific lifting sport or whatever. These people do crazy things with the sauna, like sitting in the shower for 2 hours, or go doing 2 or 3 hours of cardio a day. That's not what I'm talking about. Or pulling weight through restricting hydration or specific sodium protocols. That's not what I want to get into, because that's really not the kind of people that I usually teach. If someone wants to ever do a bodybuilding show, then for sure we might be looking into things like that. But that is more for things that I do think will give you a sustainable physique and goal weight or end weight in the end, where you're not like, because if you do these really aggressive weight cuts with water and sodium and long sauna and really long cardio, then you're going to bounce back from that. That gives you usually a weight or a physique that's not sustainable. That's not what we're talking about here, and therefore I won't go into detail. But yes, I hope you found that helpful nonetheless. I personally find the heat and cold exposure point probably one of the most intriguing ones at the moment, just because of the more and more emerging research around that. And otherwise, as you were able to see, it always starts with the basics. But yeah, there are some additional things that we can do nonetheless. So I hope you enjoyed this little live video. If you have any questions about it, please drop it in the comments or contact me in any kind of other way. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend.